Welcome back. It's Smokin' and Toastin'. This program is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. It's show number 162. Jack Ferris from Bushmills is in the studio with us today, and we are brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston, in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth, and all of the various other B&B establishments across our fair city here in Houston. Of course, we're heard all over the world. But our sponsors here in Houston, and we like to give them as big props as we can. Well, here in Houston and in Fort Worth. But trust me, they're taking over the world. They'll be out there soon, coming to where you are.
So when I went downstairs last night, a couple of the guys were sitting down there just about ready to order.
Yeah.
And they look at me, they go, "Do you recommend anything?" I said, "Start with bacon."
Yeah.
And it's all...
And just work your way through the menu.
It's all good after that. It doesn't matter what you order.
Just work your way through the menu.
Start with bacon.
Yeah. They truly have... The bacon is a life-changing experience.
If you've never been there, I don't know if you're a fan of bacon.
Oh, yeah.
It's like this thick.
Mm-hmm.
And
which doesn't seem to me like it'd be something I would like. When I tried it for the first time, I was really dubious because I like crisp, almost overcooked bacon.
This is the Chef Tommy bacon. It's like this thick. It's like a quarter-inch thick, and then it's drizzled with truffle oil and blue cheese, and it's so
it's just amazing.
Good.
It's
I don't even know how
it's
to
habit forming.
Listen to you guys talk like in that first segment. My mouth is just watering.
All right, well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. We have a similar response when somebody lines out 6 of their whiskeys for us. So Jack Ferris is here. Jack is from Bushmills. You're a brand ambassador, correct?
Brand ambassador.
What exactly are the qualifications to become a brand ambassador? Because I know what you would have to be qualified to do in order to be a distiller. But what does a brand ambassador have to be able to do?
So I'm actually a little bit of a square peg for a round hole because I'm not your standard brand ambassador. Because I was actually born and raised only 5 miles from that distillery.
Okay.
And I spent 7 years working in the distillery.
Ah.
So I even started off working on the bottling lines.
Okay.
Whenever, weirdly, I didn't actually have an interest in whiskey whatsoever.
It was just a job.
It was a job. Summertime college job. I'm taking bottles off the line, put them into the cardboard tubes. You're making sure that the boxes are going off well. Easy job. Great money. Summertime job. What more could you ask for? But the more I was at the distillery, the more I learned. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to express. And the more I wanted to express, the more I wanted to learn. So it was this vicious circle.
Mm-hmm.
So I got involved within maturation department, worked very closely with all the distillers, worked within customs and excise, worked with the bonded. I worked with every single person in that distillery.
Wow.
So over those 7 years, I got immersed in everything you could imagine, which unfortunately means I'm not your standard brand ambassador.
Right.
I mean, the biggest thing you need to be a brand ambassador is that you can talk to people and you can actually believe in what you're talking about.
Sure, it requires a certain amount of I dig this and I want to share it with you.
You have to have some passion for it, right?
Oh,
absolutely.
And it's like even just finding some kind of notch of the entire bigger picture. If you find that little notch you're passionate about, everyone's going to see that and everyone's going to listen. And it's also to have a good story. I mean, if you don't have a good story or you don't have a story of exactly how you're connected to this product, well, no one's going to give you any time.
Well, one of the things that, we've been able to discover as we've, spent time doing this program, and Ian's certainly got a much longer and more rich history with whiskey than I do.
If you mean by sampling it aplenty,
yes. That's what I'm talking about, yeah. But one of the things that I've discovered is that the more I've learned about it, and the more of these stories that I have been able to hear and read about, the more, not just the more interesting it is, but the more I can actually have real appreciation for what it is that I'm tasting, for what I'm drinking. It really kind of comes with, and it's the same for other spirits too, for tequila, for rum, for
it's the same
beers.
For everything.
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan's guitar is much more interesting than a brand new guitar.
Right.
It's got stories. It's
right.
got
It's
got character, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Like across the board, no matter what you're doing.
Well, it's interesting to me that you spent 7 years in the distillery, and then you kind of hit the road telling people about what was going on at the distillery. So, so how do you like this side of it? Is this fun for you?
Yeah, I've always loved talking to people. I've always loved sharing my passion because before I left the distillery, I was running the bar within Bushmill's distillery itself because we take about 120,000 tours of the distillery every single year. And it's at least double that, if not triple, of people just coming directly into the bar. So we've got novices coming into the bar. We've got a lot of college kids coming over as well during the summertime.
Sure.
And most of them will come up and say, I don't like whiskey. And they're standing at the Bushmills distillery bar. So it's my job to figure out a way, how do I get them to enjoy a style of whiskey?
Right.
How can we relate it to them? So it was also by that, particularly last year, of like figuring out, how do I get someone engaged into whiskey that is already coming up? The first thing they've said to me is not
The
hello,
first thing, yeah, right.
is just going,
I don't like whiskey.
I don't like whiskey. And you're like, instead of standing there being flummoxed, it's like, how do I gauge, how do I get something to intrigue them? How do
Right.
I get something to pull them in?
Right.
So by doing that, I've gained up so much more of a passion. It's like sharing the story of Bushmills and converting people over to great Irish whiskey.
Right. So let me ask you about Irish whiskey, because while you could make an argument that every style of whiskey is surging right now, that, you know, whiskey is going through a real sort of renaissance in popularity, but it seems like in particular Irish whiskey is really kind of stealing the spotlight. What do you attribute that to?
I think it's just, I think we can actually connect this even down to craft beer.
Yeah.
Because 10 to 15 years ago, we only had the big boys.
Sure.
That were, everyone just knew the standard. Mm-hmm. And then people started to want to know, what is in there that I'm...
What's in my beer?
What's in my beer? And then also, what's in my food? So all of a sudden, we're starting to see more organic food coming up. We're starting
Right.
to see more shows explaining exactly what this is. And I think it just took whiskey that little bit more time. Once people became more and more engaged and more knowledgeable about exactly what beer is, what IPA is, can you compare it to an imperial stout, and that it's almost becoming standard knowledge to people who frequent bars, a couple times
Right.
a week.
Sure, that makes sense.
And that's across all demographics. I mean, we're not just talking to a male demographic. I mean, we go to a bar anytime now. I mean, you're talking 50, if not a third of the bar is the female demographic, and everyone's drinking a different style of beer.
Right.
And they know what it is. And I think Irish whiskey, just over the last couple of years, this is where that engagement's coming in, that there's more to whiskey than Scotch and bourbon.
Can you break down the difference between what makes Irish whiskey? Because I think a lot
Other
of
than
people
just
know
where it
that
comes
there's
from. Yeah.
know that there's Irish whiskey, but it's not just that it's Irish.
Yeah, like you've got a key criteria and then you've got a regional difference. So the key
Right.
criteria is the fact it must be distilled, matured and bottled within Ireland.
Right.
Okay.
So we cannot use anything else from outside. If it's going to be a single malt, it all must be done under one roof. So if we bring together two single malts together, that's going to be not a pure single malt.
Right.
But the regional difference, when people ask me, what is the difference between Irish and Scottish whiskey, for example? Now, these are regional differences. It doesn't mean everyone has to follow these. So typically, an Irish whiskey is triple distilled. And what that typically means is that it's smoother in comparison to a Scottish style, which is generically double distilled.
Right.
Now, again, there's exceptions to every rule, but these are minor exceptions.
Sure.
And then the other big difference is the fact with Irish whiskey, typically we only dry out our raw ingredients, in our case, malted barley, using hot, clean, fresh air. So there's no impurities in there whatsoever. Whereas traditionally a Scottish whiskey is allowing peat smoke to be infused into and also the region of different Scotland, basically that varies from very, very light to phenomenally strong.
Right.
Almost as if you accidentally dumped out.
Lafrague.
Yeah. It's, basically Islay. Islay is renowned for it.
Ardbeg,
Yeah, right.
And weirdly, Islay is our closest point from ourselves to
Right.
Scotland.
Right.
We're only 17 miles from where we are on the north coast of Ireland to Scotland. The closest point between the north coast of Ireland and Scotland is only 11 miles. So even though we're so close, our styles of whiskey
Very
are
different.
worlds apart.
Vastly different,
Yeah.
vastly different. Well, let's start with a little tasting. You pulled out a couple for us to taste first. Tell us about these and what makes these the place to start.
Yeah, so basically what we have here are 3 of our blended whiskies, and then we've got 3 of our single malt whiskies.
Okay.
So what we're going to start off, I always like doing things chronologically. So we've got a 4, a 5, an 8, a 10, a 16, and a 21.
Okay.
So the 10, 16, 21 are our single malts. So we'll start with our youngest blended whiskey.
Okay.
So the youngest one we have here is actually the newest addition to our family. Now remember, our family is over 411 years old. So, I mean, this is a very recent addition. So this is going to be a 4-year-old whiskey. It is a blended whiskey. And the reason we blend whiskey is to make that whiskey accessible. So
Right.
whenever I'm out at the bar, you can have 1, 2, maybe even 3 of these. Whereas your single malts, you can have 1 glass and take your time.
Right. And is this where you would start someone if they said to you, "I don't like whiskey"?
So can I
Yeah.
back up just one moment? I want to point out the difference between a single malt and a blended is because not all of our listeners know the real difference. So blended whiskey is when you have a few different malt bills that you blend together to create a flavor. So it's much like taking some different ingredients to create a dish. Whereas a single malt is telling you a couple things. That's saying single is telling you it's all under one roof, and malt is the main mash bill going on there.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So this is going to be, essentially, this is actually designed for the American palate. This is not even designed for the Irish palate. And the reason being is that this is matured only inside first fill, formerly used American bourbon barrels. So they've been used by the American bourbon industry once, and once only. Obviously, that's one of the rules within the bourbon industry. Now, typically, most Irish whiskies will use that bourbon barrel once, twice, and 3 times to balance out the flavour. But for the Red Bush, we only use those first fill bourbon barrels. And that is why you'll see for a 4-year-old whiskey, that's carrying quite a reddish hue. I mean, as comparison, the second one we're going to try, which is our original, you'll see it's actually lighter.
Yes.
Even though the original's
more,
older.
yeah, more of an amber.
This is actually an
lighter
older
color.
whiskey.
Yeah. Wow.
So by using only first fill bourbon, you're going to get all those bourbon connotations, all those sweetnesses. It's a very, very sweet style. But remember, it's our whiskey. We've distilled it, we've matured it, we've bottled it. So instead of whenever it dries, instead of that bite traditionally associated with a lot of bourbons, you're going to get the Irish smoothness.
Right. And this is not whiskeys that you've sourced from other distilleries. These are your own whiskeys that you blended into this first blend, the Red Bush.
Yeah. So the blend that we use, so obviously this is going to be a portion of our own triple distilled single malt. The grain whiskey that we use for the blending, that's tailor-made just to our specification. And that's made in a distillery on the south coast of Ireland. But no one else has access to this grain spirit. And we age everything on site ourselves.
And this is blended with a specific goal in mind. You're looking for a specific flavor to appeal to a specific palate. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. And like we have a team. Actually, our master blender for Bushmills is a lady called Helen Mulholland. She's been doing the job for the past 22 years. First female master blender ever in Irish history.
Wow.
But, I mean, that's not the reason we hired her. We hired her because she was better than anyone else. But it's down to her. She knows exactly what barrel she wants. She knows exactly what warehouse she wants the barrels from. She knows exactly what blend ratio. And Helen does this all from the knowledge that not only she gained through education, but this is a big difference about Bushmills, is that we learn everything from our predecessors, the predecessors before them. It's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. This is what makes Bushmills so different to any other brand anywhere in the world, is that we are a family that has went from hand to hand for over 400 years, and that's 400 years with a license. And we know some of our earliest records that there was mention of distillation almost 1,000 years ago on the same site we occupy today.
What is the how big is the premises?
We've got 63 acres in total, and we're producing 5 million litres a year of pure alcohol. Now, with Irish whiskey exploding right now, whenever you visit the distillery, you're going to see a massive amount of construction happening right now. So we are growing. And the best thing is that because we're so stubborn on the north coast of Ireland, we're not growing and making things more efficient. We're keeping true to exactly how we are. So yes, we're sacrificing all efficiency for a new still house. But what we're going to keep is that same quality.
Right.
Because that's how we've stood the test of time. That's how we've stood the test of time when others have closed and others have changed.
So let's taste this first one. This is basically crafted for the American palate, is what you were saying.
Yep.
And that makes sense that it would maybe be a little more bourbon-esque, if you will.
Yeah,
because
bourbon-esque.
that's where the American there's so much popularity for bourbon in the U.S. So we'll do just a little pour there. Pass that back to you.
You take the second honors.
Thank you, sir. I'm actually going to pour a little bit for our engineer over here.
Oh, even better.
Awesome.
On
share-
the
Okay,
nose,
right.
you can definitely pick up the bourbon barrel notes.
Yeah.
You can pick up the oak and the that sweetness you were talking about. on the
Sweetness. And
nose.
remember, we only use number 2 and number 3 char bourbon barrels. We get them all from Calvin Cooperage in Kentucky. And what I actually have here, so The person, it'll actually be the second piece. See in the top
This one here?
Yeah,
Yep.
now be careful because this is actually a fresh sample.
Oh, see, I can see you got a little bit
you
on
got
the
it on
hand
your
there.
hand.
Yeah.
So Alex Thomas
I love
is
that.
in charge of our maturation department. Mm-hmm. And well, that's one of the best things about being from the distilleries. I can just literally give her a text on WhatsApp, be like, hey, can I get a few more samples? And she sends them out. And this was only sent out a couple of weeks ago. So this is a very, very fresh sample. And you can see the crocodile in there. So you can tell it is a number 2 and number 3 char. Because as I travel around the country, this char does wear down. And this is how you can see that used to be crocodile.
Okay,
But it's
yep.
completely worn down now. So
Yep.
every now and again, you need to get the samples freshened up. So again, what you'll notice on the palate, you're going to get all that sweetness at the start. Mm-hmm. And then you'll notice it dries. But instead of that bite, that burn, you're going to get that smoothness.
That's
So-
a big round whiskey hug.
It really
all
is.
the way down.
It really is.
It happens. It's interesting because it happens right at the point when you swallow, right at the back of the palate. You get that heat, but it's such a round, silky kind of feeling.
Round is
And
a great way to describe
and
it.
you're
yeah.
also describing Bushmills right there. That's silkiness, that's softness.
Yeah.
That's that triple distillation. And that triple distillation is like copper pot stills.
Right.
So copper pot stills, weirdly, is actually even our trademark. We trademarked copper pot still as a logo back in 1784. So in the top of every single bottle, you will see our
Nice.
trademark, which is that
Yeah,
copper pot
the copper
still.
pot still. Yeah.
What is a bottle of this? What's the price range on this bottle?
This is going to be, I believe, under $25.
That's
in around that. Yeah.
Pretty fantastic at that price
You
point.
got it. Yeah,
especially.
yeah. You got to love that, and that's again, this is your. I was kind of wondering about this earlier. Is this where you're likely to start someone who says I don't really like whiskey?
Whenever I'm in, well, particularly in the southern United States, whenever this is somehow what you call winter, where I'm sweating still, it doesn't make sense. How
Just so
can-
you know, it's raining in 70 today
Yeah.
here in our home city of Houston, and it's still hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's bizarre for me as an Irishman to experience this. But particularly whenever it's a warmer climate, this is the one I'm always going for. But at the same time, I'm based out of Jersey City. So I'm always in New York City. And there's a massive amount of Rickhouses, Rickhouse themed whiskey bars where they're very, very pro bourbon. This is the one that'll always fit in there. So
Interesting. Yeah.
if you want that little tagline, it's an Irish whiskey for the bourbon drinker.
Okay.
It's very like the trailing aftertaste on this is very. There's some cinnamon in there. There's some vanilla in there.
And a little bit of dried fruit on the tongue is what I'm picking up.
No, the fruit, I'm glad you mentioned the fruitiness because that fruitiness is actually our distillate coming through. So if you ever come and visit Bushmills, which I hope you do eventually, whenever you're in the still house, we've got 10 stills in there and they're all running at full capacity. The aroma in there is peaches, pear drops, it's red apple, a little bit of green. It's all these ripe, really distinctive fruity notes. So the fact if you're picking out those fruity notes, those lighter notes, that is our distillate.
That
coming through.
really comes through on the retrohale too.
It does.
Like especially when you're
And that note is only going to increase as we go through this range
nice.
as well. So
when we go up, then and this is your, what would you call this? Your
this-
flagship, your standard?
Yeah, this is our original. Bushmill's
Okay, the
original is
original.
what we always call it. So Bushmill's original first appeared in 1888. It won the world's first gold medal in the Paris Expo of 1889.
Wow.
So this is going to be a 5-year-old whiskey. Again, it's going to be a blended whiskey.
And it said it was a 4-year-old blended whiskey, the first one. Correct?
First one,
And that's the
4-year-old
red
blend.
bush that we
Yeah.
just tried.
So this, our malt content has increased, and I'll let you do the honors again.
Okay, thank you.
So this is going to be using bourbon barrels, but now in an even manner. So this is where we use them in a balanced way of once, twice, and 3 times. So unlike the Red Bush, which was only first fill, because if you imagine the second time we use a bourbon barrel, everything started to mellow down.
It's so interesting, the contrast between the two. The first one, just on the nose, the first one, the Red Bush, is so much sweeter, whereas this one has a little bit more of that, I just want to say sort of a pure whiskey aroma to it on the nose.
It's like the vanilla's less, the caramel's more. The maltiness comes out a little bit more. And even whenever you take a little sip, and this is where it becomes really interesting. So you'll notice a little bit bolder, a little bit more rounded, and you'll notice even around the lips. See how honeyed sweetness, it just lingers there.
Yes.
Yeah, the honey is really
A lot more prominent.
comes through in this. Interestingly enough, too, this one hits the middle of the palate in a very different way than the last one.
Very different,
Very
yeah.
Even
I
creaminess as
and
well.
I can totally see, though, why the first one, why the Red Bush, is where you go for the American bourbon lover palate. Because this is just completely different. It's just almost night and day different from the Red Bush, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And yet we're only 1 year difference. We're still using the same barrels, but it's how we use them in different manners. And remember, that's what happens after 411 years of practice.
I guess at 411 years, you get good at something, right?
Oh yeah. So one of the best things I love for the Bushmill's original, and there's actually a bar we work very closely with. Have you ever heard of the Dead Rabbit in New York City?
Heard of, yes.
Yes. So it's one of the world's best bar, 2 years in a row running. Now, one of their signature drinks is the Irish coffee. And one of their lead bartenders is a lady called Gillian Vose. I mean, the two founders were two guys from Belfast, a bartender and a bar manager from Belfast. So obviously that's rooted back home because Belfast is the same county as Bushmills up on the north coast of Ireland. But their lead bartender, they perfected the ratio of what an Irish coffee should be. As I've travelled this country for nearly 2 years, Irish coffee is made wrong in so many different ways. And one of the worst things, like an Irish coffee, if you're intimidated by an Irish coffee or an Irish coffee takes too many ingredients or it takes too long to prepare, it's made wrong. Yeah. The perfect way to do it is literally a 6 ounce glass. It's 1 ounce original. It's half an ounce Demer-Irish sugar syrup, so the brown sugar syrup, because you get a little more of a maple tone. Then you're doing about just under 4.5 ounces of good drip coffee. And you just layer it with heavy cream. Not your whipped cream from a can, because that is not an Irish style. You go to Ireland, you'll struggle to find that. So remember, if you're putting whipped cream on it, that's not an Irish coffee. So it's just heavy cream. You just shake it up, thicken it up, and you just layer it on so it looks like a baby Guinness. And, well, I think today's weather is perfect.
It does say. I know it's
You should have brought some ingredients.
Yeah, it's starting
Well,
to
the
sound
best
really
thing is
good.
that yesterday I was doing Irish coffee training. And my palate was salivating then as well. Well, but unfortunately, it was hitting nearly 85 degrees, was it, yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously today is ideal for it. Yesterday was a little bit intense for me.
We don't sell a lot of cars without AC here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, trust me. I've learned the benefit of like the local team whenever they throw me in the car, and I'm just like,
I'm going to shift up to beer here and taste our first beer, which is, and Ian, after I pop this open, I'll have you kind of show this to the camera. Ooh, that was nice.
The sound
That
effects.
was nice. This is the St. Arnold Guten, which is, they describe it as toasty and clean. It is their Bavarian-style lager. We are big fans of the St. Arnold brewery here, Jack. They are based here in Houston, and they just have been it's the oldest craft brewery in Texas, and they have just been a producer of really great beers of all styles for a long time. They only have one beer, I think, that I don't like, and that's just because it's not to my particular palate. But they have done a great job for so long, have not sold out to the big companies. They continue to just do their thing, and we've actually never had them on the show, which is a crime. We got to get.
I don't know why we haven't.
Yeah,
We've
I
had
don't
many
know.
of their beers.
Yeah. We certainly
I'm
have,
such
so.
a huge fan of their seasonals.
Oh my God! And they're
I'm coveting a little bit of Oktoberfest that I have left in my refrigerator, and
so
now
good.
Christmas
and
ale
their
came
Christmas
out.
ale is out, and it's fantastic.
And if
then-
you are a fan of beer, Jack,
oh yeah.
find a St. Arnold Christmas ale. It's so good, so good.
See, this is just reminding me of Belfast actually does a very big event for Oktoberfest. I mean, the beer halls are just crazy. And this smell is reminding me whenever you eventually get up to the front of the queue, you know, it's a 20-minute queue to get up to the massive
to
death.
get up.
And as soon as I smell that tap going, this smell
this
just
is
brought me
really
right back.
good.
Yeah, Ian, I had a feeling you were going to like this as soon as I tasted it because the malt profile is
It is
just
malty. I love the malts.
really in the front, and that's your thing.
It's got a bigger mouthfeel than I would expect too.
For a Bavarian lager, I
Yes.
agree. Yeah.
For a lager in general, yeah. It's very nice. The CO2 in here is just right too. The
Yes.
carbonation is like just enough to tickle your palate, but not enough to get in the way.
I do not see. Wait, hold on. Yes, 5.8%.
I want a candle that smells like
Yeah.
this.
Oh, yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
So good.
Yeah, you might show that to the camera there. It's a very attractive can, and again, these guys, These guys just do great work. We're proud to be from the same city they're from.
And for those of you, I'm talking to you, Freon. For those of you who are just listening to this, the can looks cool.
Yeah, thank you for.
He pointed out last night. He goes, I always listen to it. I never watch it. So
Well, that's that's good.
We'll try to
I know
describe
a lot of people will download it and listen to it in the car or stream it in the car or whatever. So yeah, so a lot of people hear the show rather than talking about it. But if you're just hearing the show, then you miss out on our technological advances like Mr. Twirlygig.
Well, don't forget if you put on the TV when you get home, you can always have us playing in the background on YouTube.
Great
YouTube
for those
channel is there.
Great for those romantic nights.
Absolutely,
when you're snuggled
romantic
on the couch,
evenings. Us in the background.
That's
a couple candles lit that smell like.
Yeah, it doesn't get much, but
I mean,
does it smell like Guten?
That's right. I mean, how can it get better than that?
I love this. I think this is just absolutely terrific, and I'll chalk up another big success to these guys. And I think it's worth noting that this is a very different malt forward flavor than their Oktoberfest.
Yes.
Yes. Which is also very malt forward, but in a very different way.
So this, I really do want to wear this like cologne, although I think I feel like that would be hard to explain to a police officer. No, I just love the way it smells. It's awkward.
Have you been drinking, sir? No. Well, you certainly smell like you have.
I just wear this.
I just dump it on myself. It works for me. All right, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to taste more Bushmills. We'll also be tasting an IPA that's a collaboration from Ecliptic Brewing and Bell's, two breweries that we love separately from each other.
Can't wait to try that.
We'll see how they do together. Plus, when we return, is Heineken better than craft beer? We'll get into that and why that's even a question coming up.